The Cybertruck was announced 4 years ago. I've gotten married and had 2 kids since then, but today we get the final specs of what the Cybertruck is at launch. Let's get started. For the past 4 years, Tesla has been hyping up this Cybertruck like it's the dawn of a new age, saying things like it can float on water or has a pneumatic suspension to tap into for air tools, transparent metal on the windows, costs $39,000, or has a 500-mile range, not to mention the Cyber Quad and the extendable tailgate ramp. But it turns out all of those things are just hype, and what we got delivered at the launch event is actually an incredibly reasonable machine, very comparable to the other electric trucks that have been on the market for years. And don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing. The Cybertruck is still an extremely impressive vehicle. But falling from that pinnacle of hypothetical hype before the event to the reality of what was actually delivered at the event, it was just an extremely tall precipice from which we all had to plummet. So let's look through the hoopla for a minute, forget what we've been told, and have a realistic conversation. The Cybertruck, as it stands right now, does have some major advantages over the competition. And as a truck owner and a Rivian owner, I am jealous about a few things. I'll start with thing number 1 that I'm jealous of, and that's the stainless steel body. I think the biggest flaw in my Rivian is actually this rear quarter panel. Yeah, the seamless design looks cool, extending up from the back edge of the bed up over the top of the cab, but if this aluminum panel on my Rivian gets dinged and needs to be replaced, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars, since the whole truck and top glass need to be taken apart just to replace the panel. Not cool. With the Cybertruck, however, it is far more durable with basically the invincible body of a tank. For example, I'm here with my friends over at Oshka. They use a lot of nitrogen for laser cutting, and they have liquid nitrogen that we can play around with to see what happens to steel and stainless steel at extremely cold temperatures. Metals have different properties. The stamped steel in regular vehicles is less expensive, but corrodes or rusts very easily. And when subject to the extreme temperatures of negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit, like liquid nitrogen, or what we would see on Mars or the voids of outer space, steel shatters like glass. Shattered like glass. No way. Oh, that is too cold. Look at that. I had no idea steel was that fragile. That is nuts. Alright, let's try stainless. Stainless steel, however, is incredibly corrosion resistant, does not rust, and does not need to be painted. And it can apparently withstand the inhospitable voids of outer space just fine. Once the smoke stops coming out, we know the metal's to temperature. The smoke is slowed down. This one is stainless steel. Crazy. The stainless steel is bent and intact and has not shattered like glass. That's incredible. This is a 304 stainless steel, very similar to the alloy used on the Starship rocket and the Cybertruck. One more. Still intact. At first I thought the Cybertruck would be super heavy, contributing to the less than advertised range at the launch event, because of the bulletproof armoring. But it turns out the Cybertruck, while being bigger than my Rivian, is lighter than my Rivian. The Cybertruck is 6,843 pounds, while the Rivian is 7,148. And I think that has to do mostly with the battery construction. See, the Cybertruck is using this, a 4680 cell manufactured by Tesla directly. There are 1,366 of these inside of a Cybertruck, giving it 123 kilowatt hours worth. And you might be thinking to yourself, hey Jerry, is there a brand new Cybertruck out there right now missing a battery? Rivian, on the other hand, uses a much smaller cell. It's called a 21700, and there's 7,777 of these. So that's like 7 times as many cells as the Cybertruck. Rivian has more metal casings, more soldering, more metal bus bars, and more potential points of failure, and more importantly, more weight. And I think it's the batteries that make my Rivian weigh more than an armored Cybertruck. Tesla owning their whole supply chain make me think that the current higher than expected Cybertruck pricing is temporary. And once they ramp up and get caught up with all the pre-orders, we'll see some drastic price cuts like they've done in all their other vehicles. But that's probably like 3 years from now, so feel free to @ me in 2027. But let's get back to the stainless steel, since it is scientifically legitimate and the additional armored weight is obviously not an issue. The shape of the Cybertruck, however, is an issue, not from an aesthetic polygon point of view, but from a utility perspective. The slope sides of the beds can't hold a toolbox or side boxes, and more importantly, the reason Tesla used an excavator to show off the 2,500-pound bed capacity in their promo video is because a bobcat skid steer tractor, which is far more common on farms or landscaping companies, can't properly load the bed over diagonally slanted sides. Tractors will have to lift higher and drop loads farther if someone decides to use their Cybertruck like an actual truck. Also, from a utility perspective, Rivian has a dedicated storage spot for the spare tire in the bed of the truck. The Ford Lightning also has an included spare underneath the truck, but with the Tesla Cybertruck, if you want a spare, you lose the entire bed, and you gotta ratchet strap that thing down. It's not convenient, and you lose all the space that makes a truck a truck. Also, I gotta get this off my chest. Elon said this about the glass.
You don't have to worry about like rocks hitting the glass and cracking the glass. This glass is basically rock-proof.
Smartphone manufacturers have been telling us forever that their glass is the most durable, the most shatter-resistant, the most shock-proof glass ever made, but it's all lies. Glass is glass, and glass breaks every time. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Another thing I'm jealous of the Cybertruck is the 9.6 kilowatt-hour 240-volt plug in the back of the bed. That would have been extremely helpful while welding my bunker, powering an RV, or charging up electric sports vehicles like the Taiga Orca or the electric snowmobile, both of which I've made videos about if you're curious. I plan on getting one of the electric snowmobiles myself, and using my truck as a charging station would be really appealing. My Rivian has 420-volt outlets, I think, which isn't very helpful with the big boy toys or big boy tools, but it does have an air compressor. The Cybertruck has 4 or 5 outlets with that 240-volt plug in the back. The Ford Lightning, however, has 11 outlets with that same 9.6 kilowatt hours of power, and a 240-volt plug as well. And both the Cybertruck and the Lightning can act as whole home backups, which is also extremely appealing. My Rivian can definitely not, so I am jealous of those features. Another bonus with the Cybertruck, if it's not a lie, is the battery range extender, which Rivian also has a patent for but is not yet selling. And I think unless Tesla has a product on the shelf, we just gotta pretend like it doesn't exist. Don't get me wrong, Tesla has accomplished more than any auto manufacturer ever, but they are also an unrestrained hype machine. The 3 main players right now, Rivian, the Cybertruck, and the Ford Lightning, are all within spitting distance of each other, and all 3 trucks are miles ahead of their gas-powered counterparts, unless you're a long-haul trucker, which is a completely different ballgame. The last question I have is, what in the world is this random box on the back of the Cybertruck? This thing has got to kill the departure angle while off-roading, and my Rivian actively tries to eliminate that curve near the end of the bed, while Tesla added to it. So if anyone knows, tell me down in the comments. I think if Tesla released the Cybertruck at their original $39,000 price point, it would be the only vehicle on the road, but that's not what we got. And it's definitely not the truck to end all trucks that Tesla was hyping it to be. Maybe gas-powered trucks, it's definitely infinitely better than all of those. But the Cybertruck appears to be on par with all the other electric trucks on the road right now, in my opinion. Of course, I have not driven, sat in, or even tested a production off-road version of the Cybertruck yet. I am, however, very curious about the steer-by-wire, where instead of a steering wheel being directly connected to the front wheels, we have dual redundant electrically controlled steering motors. I'm also curious about the 4-wheel steering and the towing range with these higher capacity cells. They can output more energy for longer, which might change my opinion in the future. And of course, if Elon wants to show off the Cybertruck's water fording capabilities, my schedule is incredibly free for that. At $80,000, the EV truck space is still anyone's game. I do have one on pre-order, and I'll probably still go through with that. I'll use it as a work truck for my wheelchair manufacturing business. With sides that flat, if nothing else, it'll make for an excellent billboard. If you want to see the Cybertruck durability tested in real life, hit that subscribe button. And thanks a ton for watching. I'll see you around.